Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the very first edition of Banter podcast here from the deluxe Ben Salem studios in our basement. Welcome in, everybody. I'm Tyler Zulli alongside my partner in crime, my co-host, and all-around just great guy, Brandon Zulli. Brandon, what's going on today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing today, Tyler?
You know, I think I'm doing pretty well. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Before we do that, I think we should establish some ground rules. This is the first podcast, so what we're going to do with this podcast is we're going to try to do it fairly consistently. We're going to try to get about 1 to 2 per weekend, somewhere between a half an hour and an hour of banter. We'll start with some big news, some breaking news, things like that from around the world. We'll get into some lighter-hearted topics. We'll cover everything across the spectrum. We'll talk politics. We'll talk music. We'll talk sports. We'll talk video games. We'll talk what's going on in your local Acme today at some point. I'm sure we'll get to that. So we've got a large spectrum of things to cover over the next few weeks until I can find myself a real big boy job once again.
As can I.
So, let's get started because I think this is timely news. By the time this gets out, it'll be a little bit old, but it is 1:50, just about to be 1:50 Eastern Standard Time here in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. And by the way, May 19th at 1:50 p.m., that's today, almost right now, Donald Trump will depart the White House for the first leg of his foreign trip. He'll start his foreign trip in Saudi Arabia. And I know you've got a lot to talk about for Donald Trump, so I think
I do.
We'll just open the floor right to you.
I'm not alone in this fact, but I have so many problems with Donald Trump anywhere near the White House.
Well, I think a lot of people do, but
yes.
I guess specifically, what's the big problem today?
The big problem is what happened with the Turkish president, I believe last week. The Turkish president met with Donald Trump in the White House for some kind of diplomatic meeting. And protesters had surrounded the White House, as they usually have been doing, and they were attacked.
Now, let me ask you something before you continue. Were these protesters silver-haired, don't touch me, left-wing nutjob liberals, or were they regular people?
They appeared to be regular people.
Okay. Because you know my take. I'm neither a right-wing conservative or a left-wing liberal. I think we both fall kind of in the middle.
Yes. We both fall in the reason of logic.
Yeah, exactly.
But these protesters who were nonviolent, though they were somewhat aggressive from what I've seen, were attacked by security guards in suits who were confirmed to be bodyguards of the Turkish president, who, on record, I believe, was recorded in saying that he ordered them to attack the protesters. And Donald Trump or the police did not stop this.
So this man came onto U.S. soil.
Yes.
With what was supposed to be a friendly meeting with the White House and with what little friends Donald Trump probably has left.
Yes.
It was supposed to be a friendly meeting, and these suits, quote-unquote bodyguards, went on and attacked the American protesters. Now, let me ask you this. Were they egging these men on? Was it because you know this story better than I do? Was it a provoked attack, or was it just kind of aggression out of nowhere?
I can't say for certain. I haven't seen everything. I do believe they were slightly provoking the bodyguards, but I don't think it warranted a full-out assault, which just erupted into chaos eventually. It was completely unwarranted and completely uncalled for, and we should have some kind of apology from the Turkish president for the actions of his bodyguards, who were on his orders to attack.
Well, 2 days ago, or 3 days ago now, Trump tweeted out, and I've got his Twitter page here, which, if you take a minute and just kind of scroll through his tweets, you could get some good laughs out of them. Because some of them are just
as long as you don't take them
awful.
Too serious.
Well, that's the thing. His tweet May 16th was, "It was a great honor to welcome the president of Turkey," and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that man's name, but it was a great honor to welcome the president of Turkey to the White House today. Now, this comes on the heels of this attack.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a great honor?
I would never use those words after what happened. with the protesters. I would say it was a pleasure to meet him. However, afterwards, I would have to have some choice words with him.
Choice words for sure. Let's keep on Donald Trump, but let's switch the topics a little bit. I want to get to this, get your opinion. It's kind of cycled through now. It's a little bit old news. We live in a 24-hour news cycle now where you can get news at 3 a.m. just as well as you can at 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. at night. News cycles on almost more of a 24-second news cycle. But Donald Trump came out and said something along the lines of, I'm being treated the most unfairly and basically being attacked more than any president in the United States. Now, before you go on a rant, just let me say this. I, along with you and most other people that have picked up a book, know that I believe it's 4, it might be 5, it may be 5 presidents were assassinated. Shot in the head, 2 of them. And I don't like to make jokes, but John F. Kennedy's brains literally were all over a Dallas road.
Yes.
And he's being treated the most unfairly?
Unfairly?
I don't want to hear it.
I think that he has such an overinflated ego, and we've all seen this happen with what he said. History and reports, actual facts do not matter to him. No matter what you say to him, if you were to go up to him and say that the second he posted that, he would just say that you're wrong, he's right, and he would walk away.
Well, and he's wrong and you're right because he's the president of the United States, because he's Donald Trump. Where do you get this sense of integrity?
Because he thinks...
And entitlement.
He's right. He probably has never been told no his entire life. He's always had a silver spoon in his mouth. And that's another point. When he went on news a couple of years ago, I'm not sure when he said his father had given him a small loan of $1 million to start out a company. I don't believe most people would consider $1 million small sums of money.
Well, let me put it this way. I don't like to indulge salaries while I work at a place, but now that I no longer work at the place that I formerly did, I'm not going to mention names and everything like that, I was making a sum of money that it would take me 40 years to make $1 million.
Without paying for anything?
Without paying for anything, and no taxes. Had I just gotten the lump sum, it would have taken me 40 years. Now, granted, that's a low end of a salary, and that's what happens when you work at a small town, local establishment like I did. And it's understandable. You have to build your way from the bottom to the top. I understood the salary when I took the position. There was no complaints from me. But $1 million loan is not small, my friend. A small loan is you say, hey, Tyler, I've got to go get my hair cut. I've got $5. Can I borrow $5? Mm-hmm. I got you.
That's a small loan.
Sure, I've got you. Hey, Tyler, I'm a little short on rent money this month. Can I borrow $50? Yeah, I can help you out. I know you're good for it. $1 million is not a small loan.
Exactly. Another problem, just getting away from this topic, another problem I have with him is that even with just reports on himself, not just other people, he doesn't care about the facts. At one point during the campaign that he was running, he was on Fox News and he said, I don't condone any form of violence at my rallies. However, I do believe it's around 10 televised times that he was just advocating that the crowd uprise into a riot on protesters.
Well, not only crowds, but I mean, you watch when he does a press conference, the physical removal of reporters and those sitting around and watching because they asked the wrong question. Here's the deal. You have the right to say, I'm not going to answer that. Mm-hmm. You have the constitutional right. But I, as a reporter, and not me saying I, as a reporter, generalizing, I can legitimately say I, Tyler Zulli, as a reporter, have the constitutional right to ask you that question.
Mm-hmm. And it's insane because a few press conferences ago, I think about a month ago, he was not allowing any news outlets that he considered fake news or
Oh,
harsh questions
boy.
into the press conference room, and the only seat that was reserved was for an online newspaper called Breitbart News, which is far right past the stratosphere conservative,
So we're talking almost conspiracy theorists.
led by Steve Bannon, his new security general.
That's a conflict of interest.
Exactly.
So real quick before we wrap this segment up, here's an article from USA Today, and I want to establish again, when we talk politics, if we bring up an article or a news outlet, it's not us endorsing the news outlet. It's just us saying here are the facts that are being laid out by said news outlet. So we're not endorsing USA Today or CNN or NBC or Fox News, whatever outlet we have, we're not endorsing it. We're just saying here are the facts. So here are the facts of an article from USA Today. 5 politicians who were treated more unfairly than Donald Trump.
I think those would be the 5 assassinated.
Well,
presidents.
it's politicians. It's not just even presidents. 2 of them are presidents. Number 1, Abraham Lincoln. And it says the first Republican president has Trump beat for 2 reasons. First, states began to secede before Lincoln even took office, just based on what they knew about his attitude towards slavery. Now let's take a step back here for a little bit and go 4 to 8 to 12 years before Abraham Lincoln was the president. Abraham Lincoln is not the reason the Civil War happened. It's just not how things worked out. The presidents that came before him were his predecessors, were the reason that the Civil War broke out, along with the fact that there was a difference in slavery and a difference in trade and all that. But if you take a look at the 2 presidents before him, they were both one-term presidents for a reason. Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan, because they both allowed segregation they just kind of put their hands up and said, you know what, whatever.
They closed their eyes.
Whatever, slavery's whatever, no big deal. If you do it, you do it. If you don't, you don't.
It's a necessary evil.
It's a necessary evil, exactly, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I agree with them. Abraham Lincoln probably was treated more poorly. It says, and then secondly, where's this at? An actor who didn't like Lincoln took things a bit. An actor who didn't like Lincoln took things a bit further and put a bullet in his head.
Yes.
Sure. And then you've got John F. Kennedy.
Which, as we previously stated, his head was on the top of that Ford.
Well, and not only that, you've got to remember, Kennedy, I think much like Barack Obama to some people, was criticized because of a characteristic. Very much like Barack Obama, everybody said, well, he's black, he can't be whatever.
Mm-hmm.
John F. Kennedy was Catholic.
There hadn't been a Catholic
And there
president.
hadn't been a Catholic president at that point, and they basically said, well, if John F. Kennedy becomes the president, the Pope's going to run the country.
Yes.
Guys, it's 1960 whatever at that point. The Pope doesn't have
any authority,
political and judicial power. He's a figurehead at this point. If you'd have said the Pope's going to take over Charlemagne's reign in France, I'd have said you're probably right.
Yes.
But it was the 1960s, guys, in the United States, where there was no official religion. There was no chance. Getting a little upset here.
Yeah. It's the topic.
It's the topic of the time, and it's the topic of the times, and you can't get away from it. Every news outlet, every day, and it goes back to that 24-hour cycle.
There's a new one every day.
President Trump, Hillary Clinton, President Trump.
It's never ending.
It's not.
It's getting to be overwhelming at a point where you just have to wonder, how did we get into this mess?
Exactly. Here, one final tweet we'll leave you with before we head to our first break. Donald Trump from August 6, 2012. A, quote, extremely credible source. And first of all, as a journalist, I'll put it to you this way. When you read an incredibly accurate or credible source, or a credible source, or even just a source tells me, that means that, sure, that person didn't want to go on the record, but your source, in quote-unquote source, could literally be anybody. Mm-hmm. You could have interviewed a squirrel.
I could be the source.
You could be the source. What kind of political background do you have?
I watch
Nothing.
The Daily Show.
Yeah, so you watch a satirical show.
Mm-hmm.
You know what kind of political background I have? Nothing, because I'm not a politician. I'm not a credible source. if you wanted to say, oh, I asked a credible source about what's going on in the Zulli basement, sure, I'm a credible source.
We know everything that goes down.
Right. But credible source, and especially one in quotes, that is...
It's suspicious.
It's suspicious for sure. But a credible source has called my office and told me that Barack Obama's birth certificate is a fraud. Why do you care? Why? Tell me, why do you care?
When was this posted?
August 6, 2012.
So, I believe he cared because he definitely didn't want him to be president.
He was already president.
I know.
What's the difference?
I believe in his mind he thinks that's just a way to get him out of the office somehow.
He wasn't going to be impeached. It wasn't going to happen.
We know that. He thinks it will. At least most likely.
Well, he's a little bit messed up in the head, that's for sure. Let's take a quick break. On the other side, we're going to get to a little bit of a different topic. We're going to move away from politics. Like I said, we'll cover the entire spectrum and then some on this podcast. So we'll take a quick commercial break. On the other side, you'll be back for some more Baron Banter. Welcome back to Baron Banter, the very first Baron Banter here on a couple of platforms. We'll put it up on Twitter. We'll put it up on YouTube. Easy Mode Earls. That's Brandon's channel. A couple of his buddies run that one as well. But this podcast will specifically be myself, Tyler Zulli, and, like I mentioned, Brandon Zulli. A couple of brothers talking about whatever we feel like.
The news of the world.
The news of the world. What's going on in our stupid little lives. Basically, like we said, whatever we feel like. We'll try to make this fairly consistent. Try to make it 1 or 2 times a week. Somewhere between a half an hour and an hour. That's the beauty of podcasts. You can make them as long or as short as you want.
That's best part of being a singer as well.
Exactly correct. Exactly correct. All right, so we're going to move away from political talk. Let's get to a little bit of a rant that I have. Because I have a major problem.
What is your problem, Tyler?
Last Friday, May 12th, our uncle and I went to go see one of my favorite bands in the world, Metallica. And we were there to see Metallica, and there's no denying that. But the bill for this show was what I was really interested in. And the opening acts were great. They were all multi-platinum selling artists. It was just going to be this crazy, awesome show. And it opened up with Volbeat. And Volbeat was there, and Volbeat kicked ass. Mm-hmm. Volbeat was awesome. They played for about 45 minutes, just hit after hit after hit. I know you don't really listen to Volbeat.
I know the Warriors,
but you know some of them, and it was just big hit after big hit after big hit. Then it was supposed to be Avenged Sevenfold, and then it was going to be Metallica. So I know you're not a big metal guy like I am, but you know all 3 of those bands.
I do. I listen to them regularly.
You know how big those bands are. There's no Johnny and his local Philly band. You know what I mean? They are 3 multi-platinum selling artists. This was going to be... They're monsters. This was going to be awesome. So we get an update about 10 hours before the show starts that Avenged Sevenfold is backing out of the show because one of the guitarist's wife went into early labor. Now, here's the thing. Childbirth is a natural thing. You don't really have control when the baby's coming out.
True.
So I have no issue with the fact that they pulled off the bill. That's not what this rant is about. Because even without Avenged Sevenfold, Volbeat and Metallica were awesome. Mm-hmm. Here's the issue that I have. Avenged Sevenfold, and I think they're trying to, get in the good graces of their fans, put out a tweet and said, Philly! Exclamation point. We're going to make it up to you for missing the World Wired show on May 12th. So we're going to make it up to you. On June 22nd, we're going to play at the BB&T Pavilion, which used to be the it's in Camden. What did it used to be? It was
I'm unsure.
What was it? It was the Tweeter Center a long time ago. It was the Susquehanna Bank Center. So they're playing in Camden on June 21st with a local band to open up. And they're going to give more information. So I'll bring this up. More information. They don't really have it at the time, but it should be coming out in the next couple of days. They said, keep your eyes peeled for more info, and we'll see you this summer. Mm-hmm. Now, I would have to think they sent out an email with instructions on how to redeem your ticket, which makes me believe that if you had a Metallica ticket,
You're going to get in for
You're
free.
getting in for free. I would have to think it would be the only thing that would make sense. You're getting into this Avenged Sevenfold show for free. And they're going to headline, so they'll probably play an hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes. It'll be a full big Avenged Sevenfold extravaganza.
Right.
Here's my problem. I've already got something planned for that day. I'm going to see the Phillies play a game with Mom.
Yeah. What are you going to do?
Well, I'm going to the Phillies game. So my thing is,
You're going to miss the concert.
I'm going to miss the concert. Do I get a refund? Is it just your SOL? Is it, why do I now have to sit there and say, well, I don't get to go see Avenged Sevenfold, but I still paid full ticket price to see all three bands, even though I only saw two? That, to me, it's, pardon my language, but that's bullshit.
I feel that they're not really thinking of you may have something on this specific date this far into the future. They're just trying to make sure that the
They
fans
make it up
don't
to you?
feel cheated.
Right. Well, and I get that. I understand. But I feel cheated on the fact that now I'm going to miss Avenged Sevenfold. And I paid full ticket price. So what am I going to do? The ticket's free for anybody that went to see Metallica. Most of my friends that listen to the same music I do went to see Metallica.
So they already have
So they're already going to go to Avenged Sevenfold.
Well,
Who do I give this ticket to? How do I make any money off of this?
StubHub.
How does Uncle Chuck make any money off of this? He's not going to drive all into Camden to go see Avenged Sevenfold.
He was there to see Metallica.
He was there to see Metallica. I mean, just like I was. A lot of people were there to see Metallica. I've got a good friend, him, Joe Wagner. Mm-hmm. He was there to see Avenged Sevenfold. He was up in arms that they weren't there. And because they weren't there and he was paying, these tickets were $100 to sit up top. We paid $100 each to sit up top. And I don't mean total for me and Uncle Chuck. I mean each $100 to sit up top. He was understandably upset that Avenged Sevenfold, the band that he really went to see, pulled off the bill.
Well, how does he feel now knowing that they're coming back?
Well, now he's happy that they're coming back, but it's just another night. And here's the problem for me. Here's the biggest problem for me. Sure, you're giving us a free concert, but it's in Camden. Camden's 25 miles away, which means I've got to pay for the gas there and back. I've got to pay for the toll there and back. I've got to pay for parking, which we all know concert and event parking is at least $20.
It's not cheap.
It's not cheap. So I've got to pay for that. If I want a beer, $12. If I want a soda, $7. Mm-hmm. So basically, I'm forking up another $50. Basically, I'm paying $50 to go see Avenged Sevenfold, which I would pay $50 to go see Avenged Sevenfold, but not on top of the $100 that I had already paid to see Avenged Sevenfold.
I can see why you would have a big problem with this, but I don't think there's going to be any other reparations made for people who just don't have the chance to go see them on that day.
So I've got to sell the ticket
to try and make any
any kind of money. And here's honestly the next question: where's the ticket go? I would assume that the people that paid the most, the people that sat in the pit for Metallica, get pit tickets for Avenged Sevenfold, which would probably put us, who sat up top, on the lawn. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine I'm going to get a lot of money for that ticket.
No.
Maybe $25, $30, maybe.
You're barely going to scratch any money back.
Right, I won't see any money back. And even if Uncle Chuck doesn't go and we're able to sell both of them for, let's say, $50 or $60, we'll get a quarter of what we paid back.
Mm-hmm.
It's not worth it.
That's where you just got to make the choice to go see the game.
Well, I've got to go to the game. It was a Mother's Day present. It's not like I'm missing the game. That's not an option. I'm not missing the game. So I've got to find a way to do something with this ticket.
Well, I do hope you find a way to make some of your cash back. And on that note, we're going to be sending us to another commercial break. And we will see you soon on Banter.
Hard to imagine. We're 25 minutes almost into the first Baron Banters here on Easy Motor Oils. You can find us on Twitter What's the handle? Just Easy Mode Earls?
Easy Mode Earls at Easy Mode Earls.
Easy Mode Earls is the handle on Twitter. You can find them on YouTube as well. Same thing.
Capital E-M-E.
Capital E-M-N-E for Easy Mode Earls. You'll find some good videos from a couple of morons playing some video games, what they like to do best. You'll find our new podcast now. It'll be put up, like we said, a couple of times a week. Hopefully a couple of times a week. We're going to shoot minimum once a week.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do a minimum of one per week, but maybe we'll get two if we're able to do this. Tyler Zulli, my brother Brandon Zulli. We're having some fun here in our basement, shooting the shit, having some fun, talking anything we pretty much feel like.
Across the spectrum.
Across the spectrum. That should be our show name.
Across the spectrum.
We might change it later, but
I like it.
all right. So we've got a topic here that is. Brandon's got more on this than I do. It's very teeter-totter on the edge.
I feel very personal about this.
The good thing is, like we said, it's a podcast. We're not FCC regulated. We can kind of get into a little more detail and talk about this a little less landmine steppy, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Less landmine stepping than we would have to if we were on an actual radio station. So we were playing a game on the computer. We were playing backyard football, throwing it way back.
Nostalgia.
A little nostalgia. And we kind of were talking and throwing some ideas out for the show. And Brandon came across this idea of what is the line and how do you draw the line? And is it a personal line or is there a global line between what is funny and what is in bad taste? What is just wrong to say, and what kind of toes that line about what's being funny? So, Brandon, I think I'll let you start this. Why don't you lead this segment a little bit, see how it goes from there?
Like I said, I feel very personal about this because my taste in humor is considered to be either very immature
Or very blunt.
or very dark.
Yeah.
Very blunt and very dark. I can laugh about almost anything. Any subject, and I'll get a chuckle out of it, at least. And the problem is, when I hear people say, that's not funny, you shouldn't joke about that. Like our mother says that every time I tell a joke.
Yes.
She says, I raised you better. Who taught you to do that? Nobody taught me anything. It's just what I personally find funny.
Well, and here's the thing. She says, I raised you better, but it's not like you're sitting here saying, well, death to whatever culture, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, whatever. You're not saying, I'm going to go out in a white hood and kill people.
Exactly.
It's a joke that doesn't really have any meaning behind it.
I'm making a dark joke. That's all I'm doing. But people take such offense to it, and I have a problem with it because it means nothing. It's humor.
Well, and we bashed Trump a lot in the beginning of our show, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna take the flip side now. There is a term that I'm sure you've heard recently that's going around, and it's it's fairly true. They call people snowflakes because they're delicate and soft and they break easy. It's not a lie.
No.
Everybody has such soft skin anymore that anything that you say that counteracts what they believe, you're a terrible person. And I can't believe you've not gotten in worse cases than what you have.
Let me give you an example at one time. At one time, I made a joke during while I was hanging out with my friends. And one
You
friend...
have friends?
Yes, I do have friends. You've met a few of them.
Oh, yeah, they're great upstanding guys.
One of them, I'm not really friends with him anymore. He was more of a friend of a friend.
Right.
I made a joke at one point, and he was so offended. He was so outraged by this that he got up and shoved me to the ground, said, that's not funny, you need to shut your mouth, and stormed out. I was dumbfounded because I made a dirty joke. It was dark. It was dirty, but it meant nothing. It was just something that popped into my head because sometimes I don't have a filter between what my brain
you do not whatsoever.
and what my mouth says. I should. And it just came out. And I would expect, oh, haha, shut up, just shut up. But I wasn't expecting him to get physical with it.
Right.
And that's the problem with this because you don't know where other people's lines are. And that's why I think no one should be able to say, you shouldn't joke about that, because it's not for you. It's for me. It's what I find funny.
Well, let me ask you something. Had you have made that joke, let's say you were a stand-up comedian and you had made that joke, everybody would have gone, ha ha, he's a stand-up comedian. He's probably towing the line, but at the same time, it's not a...
It doesn't mean...
Right, it's not like, again, it's not like we're saying, and I don't want to make examples, but it's not like we're saying, burn whoever at the stake.
Mm-hmm.
You're just making a joke. Is the joke repeatable?
I don't think it should be repeatable on our first podcast.
So you probably crossed the line.
I crossed his line.
You crossed his line.
Because everyone has their own line.
Right.
Some people have generic lines. Some people have their personal lines. Like, for me, I even find it hard to laugh when someone, even at my old work, would say something innocuous about family members.
Right.
I believe I'm using that word correctly. But I would have to just grit my teeth and say, it's a joke. They don't know my family. They don't mean anything by it.
Right.
And then there's general lines. Like, I can't remember his name. There was a comedian that I love to watch, and I saw him once, and he made a joke about the Boston Marathon. And he was talking about the same subject we are, crossing lines and everything. And the joke was...
Crossing the line was the joke.
He said... People had told him you can't make a joke about this because it had just happened.
Right.
And he goes, hey, there are some lines you just don't cross. I found it hysterical. Our mother was sitting in the living room with me, and she looked disgusted. She said, that's horrible. You should never joke about people losing their lives. I said, why? What's so wrong about this? It's tragic. I'll never say it's not. Like 9/11. That has become one of our country's biggest jokes, hasn't it?
I think you have to be very careful when you talk about a national tragedy like that in the terms of, if you make a joke, you to me, it might be funny. But if you make a joke out in public, you don't know who lost a family member in 9/11. You don't know who lost multiple family members in 9/11, So it's tough to sit there and say, well... I'm going to make a joke about 9/11, or I'm going to make a joke about the Boston Marathon Massacre. It's personal lines for everybody.
Exactly.
Now, I don't have a problem with a personal line. I have a problem with thinly veiled, way too close to the chest lines.
Mm-hmm.
When you hold your cards so close to the chest that everything is... unacceptable to you.
Everything offends you.
Everything offends you. You've got a problem, and it's not me having a problem for making a joke about a guy in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's not me having a problem about making a joke about, somebody with no arms and no legs. Or a midget. It's not like I'm saying this to be personally attack this person personally. It's just a joke.
It's not meant to mean anything.
Right, exactly.
It's meant to... most of the time when I'm making a joke, it's usually when people don't want to joke. You came home from your baseball practice yesterday. How angry were you?
I had a horrible practice. I was very, very angry.
You were pissed. I made a joke to try and make you feel better. You had said you held yourself to a higher standard. What popped in my head? I am Jesus Baseball, God of all sports.
Right.
And I got you to chuckle, and you started to smile a little. That's what I go for. I don't go for all the time dirt, filth, and dark. I just say it when it pops into my head because I think it'll alleviate tension or I think it'll get a chuckle. If it's dark, that means it's just more sensitive and it's just a more volatile situation. And I don't mean anything by it. And most people don't. But I just feel strongly, like I said this entire time, I feel strongly when people say, don't joke about that. I say everything should be joked about. Maybe not instantly, but eventually it has to. Because comedy is tragedy plus time. And, I mean...
Comedy is a tool for all spectrums. And we keep coming back to that word spectrum.
Yes.
Comedy is a tool for your darkest hour. Comedy is a tool when you're on cloud nine. It works both ways. For me, there have been times where I've been in the greatest moods of all time, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to throw Kev Hart on. I'm going to throw Jim Jeffries on. I'm going to throw Jim Gaffigan on. And I crack up laughing. And there are times where I am, borderline depressed, and I go, I need something to lift my spirits. That's when a good comedy special comes into play. I understand that a personal situation. Man, what is that?
Apologies, we had some.
Is it the sump pump?
Yes, it is.
The sump pump's going off.
We had some technical difficulties. I found them funny.
I find it that personal situations on the surface should not be joked about. The day after 9/11 happened was not the time to make jokes.
No. But you know who did? South Park. And they made a big episode about it where every kid on his way to school wore a gas mask. Butters didn't have one. He had to hold his breath. He passed out in the snow. And then they went over to the Middle East. And it was needed because it lifted everyone's spirits just a little, saying, hey, life isn't over. And maybe one day we'll just be able to go back to our normal selves.
Yeah. Pick up the pieces and get it going once again. You've got anything else you really want to get off your chest on this segment before we get to our final break?
I don't think I can say anything else without repeating myself.
I
just have to say, know the people you're with, know
their limits,
know what they find funny, and just try and make sure everyone knows you don't mean nothing by it. Because when you start meaning something by it, that's when that's when even I start having a problem with you. If you say something even meaning to be funny, but you believe it, that's a problem.
Well, on that note, let's send it to our final break. On the other side, we're going to make things a little more lighthearted than what we did over the first couple of segments. We kind of ranted and raved for what's been almost 40 minutes now. Let's finish up with a little bit of a light segment. We'll give you a little bit of a cue. We mentioned it in this last segment, so we'll have some fun. Stick around here on Banter. Back for our final segment here on the very first Banter. Find us on Easy Motorals on Twitter and on YouTube. You'll find lots of great stuff, some really terrible stuff, and everything in between.
A lot of terrible stuff.
I was trying to give you a little bit of a plug there, Brandon.
I wouldn't.
It didn't work too well, huh?
No.
All right, well, let's get to this final segment here. Like we said, we're going to keep it lighthearted. Like we mentioned, we were playing backyard football today for a little nostalgia factor. And I had recently read an article, and it kind of brings this full circle. I'd like to know, first of all, who got paid to write this article, because I want that job.
It would be an amazing job.
But the article was a top 29. I don't know why they went. Maybe there only is 29. I don't know.
Because they had two in the same spot.
Oh, that's right. They did. That's why they had two in the same spot. Top 29 backyard kids of all time. Now we're not talking the pros that became the kids. The Donovan McNabb or
the Brady's.
Yeah, exactly. Your professionals that became kids. We're talking strictly the kids that are in every game. Kenny Kawaguchi. And that's where our topic kind of started when Kenny Kawaguchi's in a wheelchair and he plays football. You have to two-hand touch him. And, some a little bit more dark thoughts that we had.
Yes.
But those kind of kids. And they came out with a list of the top 29. And Brandon and I immediately looked at each other and we said, well, we know who number one is. And I think you all, if you ever played backyard sports, you know who number one is too. He's the secret weapon, the guy that we were all astounded when we were 18, 19 years old and we found out that our childhood kid that didn't speak English actually does speak English. It's Pablo Sanchez. We're going to just tell you that right now. I don't think anybody has a problem with Pablo being number one. Pablo is a beast in everything.
He is the god of all sports.
He is the god of backyard sports. Now, let me ask you this. Pablo is the best at
baseball.
I agree with you on that one. Although Pablo is great at football and he's lightning quick on the basketball court, baseball is his forte. But let's get to the rest of the top.
Can't throw a strike on him.
Let's get to his strike zone's 2.5 centimeters big. And his bat is 45 times taller than he is. And he mashes. That's all he does is mash.
Yep.
But let's get to the rest of the top 5. The top 5, in order from 5 to 1. Number 5, Dmitry Petrovic. Number 4, and I didn't agree with this until I saw her today on Backyard Football, how good she actually was. Number 4, Vicky Kawaguchi. Number 3, our man in the chair, Kenny Kawaguchi. Number 2, Jocinda Smith. And of course, number 1, Pablo Sanchez. Now, before we get to anything else, I want to talk about that top 5 and how much I disagree with that top 5.
I almost disagree with everything in that top 5.
There is one person that I would have put in the top 5 in their top 5, and she no way should be as high as what she is.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Jocinda Smith should be in the top 5.
Yes.
I would have said maybe 4, maybe 5.
Yes.
Maybe even crawl up to 3.
I would say the same.
But the fact that Jocinda Smith is 2, what sports was she good at? Basketball.
That's about it.
That's it. She said she's a baseball player. She was garbage. She was okay in football, but she was slower than you with a concrete slab tied to your back.
That's fairly slow.
Exactly. Jocinda Smith is not number 2. The rest of them, I don't think should be on the top 5 whatsoever.
At all.
At all.
I think we agree on most of the ones that have to be there. Maybe not the order.
Maybe not the order. So let's take a look at this, and we'll take a look at the top, that top 5. Let's put together our top 5.
Well, we know who number 1 is.
Number 1, I think, is unequivocally Pablo Sanchez, and it doesn't
course.
change. It doesn't matter what sports you put him in. I don't know if he could play hockey. I never used him in hockey. I just used all the pros like a cheater I was.
Yes.
So I don't know if he can play hockey, but the rest of the sports, you're using Pablo Sanchez. So start at number 5. Give me 5, 4, 3, 2, or 5, 4, 3, and 2 for your top 5.
I believe her name is Keisha.
Keisha Phillips.
Keisha Phillips should be number 5.
Okay.
Because she's a tank in football.
Okay.
And we didn't know that until very recently when you had her on your team.
Right. Let's just preface this, by the way. We play way more backyard sports than a 23 and a near 20-year-old should.
It's kind of sad.
Is it a bad thing?
No.
Probably. Is it a good thing? Yes.
But
think that one through.
Number 4, I believe, should be... Oh, sorry, I had a little crack in my throat. I believe it should be probably... I don't know. I always did find Kenny as a good player.
Okay, that's fair.
I found him good as a baseball player and even as a basketball player.
That's fair.
He was always a decent... He wasn't the best, but he always came through.
But he was always decent.
Mm-hmm. Number 3.
Now, let me say this before you continue. All of us had our go-to game.
Yes.
Whether it was baseball, football, soccer, hockey, basketball. I think they had skateboarding, but we never played that one.
I would not see how that would be fun.
Whatever your go-to game was, that will probably change your list. If you played more baseball, you might go with a certain group of people instead of, if you played more football. Personally, I played football the most. So this is my list based on who I think is the best football players, along with the additional sports. I think you probably played more baseball.
I did.
I would think so.
And that's where my number 3 is going to come in.
So go right ahead. Keep it moving.
My number 3, I know you're going to disagree, though. You never saw it, but he was a beast in baseball. Amir Khan
Really?
was number 3 for me because he always came through. He hit more home runs for me than anyone else, and it was always like my number 2 pick.
Okay.
But my number 2 for this list, I think you know who I'm going.
I know because I think honestly, just simply because of how you use this guy.
Yes.
And especially again with baseball, you use them the right way.
My number 2 is Pete Wheeler.
Mm-hmm.
He was the fastest man in the entire game. All you had
to do was bunt with him.
I laid down a bunt to the third baseman. He broke down to second, stole third. It was over. I had to run in.
Well, you had to run in the first inning almost every time. And even if you didn't score another one.
I hit him in number 3 every day.
See, that surprises me. You'd figure you'd want to get him up to the plate as many times as you could, have him lead off.
I I always had Pablo lead off.
Oh, see, I had Pablo hit 4. Pablo was a masher, man. He cleaned up.
I had him lead off, and then I had some pros in between.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
But,
so your list, it goes Keisha at 5.
Mm-hmm.
Who was 4?
It was Kenny.
Keisha, Kenny, Amir Khan, Pete Wheeler, Pablo Sanchez.
Yes.
Okay.
That was my team.
So let me ask you this: out of this top 5, this list of Dimitri, Vicky, Kenny, Jocinda, and Pablo, who do you have the biggest problem with?
Probably Jocinda. I never used her.
Okay.
I never used her, and any time I faced off against her, I destroyed her.
Fair enough. All right, let me get you my list here. My top 5. Obviously, again, there's no surprise at number 1. It's Pablo Sanchez. That's just how it is. So let me get to you my top 5. We're going to start at number 5. I think I'm going to go with a guy that you didn't mention, but personally, when I used to play, especially the very first backyard football, you know, everybody went with the pro quarterbacks, Steve Young, John Elway, whoever, Randall Cunningham. It was one of the positions that I didn't take a pro. And that guy is Dante Robinson. Dante had an absolute cannon for an arm when it came to the original backyard football. Now, granted, I don't know what he's like as the games progressed. I didn't use him as much, but he had a decent speed, so you could scramble with him a little bit. He wasn't a runner, but he had decent speed. He never fumbled the football, which is what I needed from my quarterback, because Pablo fumbles the ball all the time because he's so small.
Every day. So,
number 5 for me, Dante Robinson. I think that's a pretty safe bet. Oh, real quick, I'm looking at this list. Did you know Pablo Sanchez's middle name is Ramon?
Really?
I did not know that.
I didn't know you had a middle name.
Neither did I, but now you know. So, again, number 5, Dante Robinson. Number 1, still Pablo for me. Number 4, I think I'm going to go with your number 2. And, again, it's just because I didn't play the games as much as I didn't play baseball as much as I did football, but I'm going to go Pete Wheeler. And I'm going to go Pete Wheeler not for baseball, but Pete Wheeler for soccer. Because Pete Wheeler for soccer, you kind of just caught a stretch pass and he was gone.
Yes.
And I mean, he had a one-on-one with the goalie every time. So I'm going to use him for soccer more than I'm going to use him for baseball, but your reasoning for baseball makes a ton of sense. My number 3 player, a new entrant to this list. If you'd have asked me 6 months ago, I would have never put this player anywhere near a top 5 at all. But recently, I've used this girl for football purposes, and it's Annie Frazier. For 2 reasons. Annie's not all that fast, but she has great hands, so she plays a good wide receiver. And you know, in the newer, not the newer, but the newer of Backyard Football and Backyard Football 2003, the 2 that we have,
yes,
you need tall receivers, because when you play tall corners, they get a lot of interceptions.
Yes.
So you need a tall receiver. Annie was great at that. But what Annie did best, in my opinion, Annie is a fantastic kicker. And you need a good kicker in that game to pin teams deep in their defensive or in their offensive zone when you kick off, and you need to make extra points. I mean, you miss a ton of extra points in that game.
Unlike our friend from today.
Unlike our friend Ricky Johnson from today, who was just garbage.
I don't think he made one.
He made one.
He made
what,
one.
1 out of 6, I think?
1 out of 6 extra points.
Which is embarrassing. But I'm going to go
on a sunny day.
Annie Frazier at 3. And number 2, a girl who rushed for 65 touchdowns for me in my last backyard football season, Keisha Phillips. When we first started playing again, when we were a little bit older, and you know, when you play when you're young, you just do first 7 on the draft, and you pick
all pros.
You pick all pros, and your teams, you win 175-0.
Then when you get older, you look for a bit of more challenge.
Right, you look for a bit of a challenge, so you pick a lot of backyard kids. We took Keisha Phillips on our first ever season. We actually picked her as a wide receiver.
I thought we picked her as a blocker.
No, because we had Javon Kirsch. I always take Javon
right.
Kirsch. But we had her as a wide receiver, and things weren't working out with our original running back. I forgot who we picked, but we put Keisha back there one day, and the rest was just
she
history.
Dominated.
She's not the fastest running back in the world, but she bowls people over. I mean, she runs people over at an incredible rate. And when you pick up 65 rushing touchdowns in a season, you're doing something right.
You're doing pretty well for yourself.
You're doing pretty well for yourself. And number 1, obviously, we've said it 100 times,
Pablo
Sanchez. He is the secret weapon. He is the greatest backyard. He is almost a cheat code. It's like he should be a cheat code.
He should be the Mr. Handy.
Yeah, he should be Mr. Clanky.
Yes.
I agree with you on that one. He should be. But anything else you got on backyard players? Is there anybody?
I do believe we have one player in our repertoire that is greater than Pablo Sanchez.
Well, yes, but he's a created character, so he doesn't quite count. Is there anybody on this list that you saw, maybe outside of the top 10 that you thought was way lower than they should have been, or somebody, that just you think maybe got screwed out of this list?
Not that I can think. Can you?
I don't think so either. I think I'm trying to take a look back, and the problem is you got to click one at a time. They've got Dante Robinson at 8. I think that's a little low. Here you go. Here's one. Luana Liu. No, that's Vicky Kawaguchi who's good at football. Right. Luana Liu at number 9. I don't think I agree with that.
She should be way higher up.
I think she should be in the mid-teens to low 20s. Number 9 just seems way, way, way too high. Here's another one at 10, Angela Del Vecchio. I thought Tony was better, and Tony was pretty bad.
Oh, yeah. Their stats are almost nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't agree with that. But I think that should probably just about wrap it up. We got a good 45 minutes out of this first podcast. Like I said, some of them will be a little bit longer, some of them a little bit shorter, based on what kind of topic of conversation we have and how we're feeling that day. But anything you'd like to add before we close this first show out?
Not that I can think of, my friend.
Well, let's send a shout out one more time. Let's plug ourselves one more time. On Twitter, Easy Mode Earls. On YouTube, Easy Mode Earls. You can find Brandon and Devin play a lot of games. Brandon and a couple of his other buddies, they do a lot as well.
You're in a few of those
I'm on
episodes.
A couple of them as well, but this podcast will be only the two of us. We won't bring anybody else in unless we find a way to get some interviews. Maybe we'll figure it out as we go along. Maybe we'll get the phone set up and get some interviews. Right. And if you guys like it, leave a comment and tell us what you'd like us to talk about. We're open for pretty much anything. But for my co-host, Brandon Zulli, my brother, my PIC, the pain in my ass that he is, Brandon Zulli, I'm Tyler Zulli saying thank you for tuning in to the very first Banter. We will see you on the other side. Spectrum.